Good day to you. I'm wearing a t-shirt just like many others wear t-shirts, and it has lettering on it just like many others have lettering on their t-shirts, and this one says 90.3 WESS. That's ESU's radio station. Did you know that ESU has an MTV Woody Award winning radio station? Yeah, that's right. That's a radio station that won the Woody Award from MTV for being the best college radio station in the whole country. Not just Pennsylvania, not just the East Coast, the whole country. We've got that distinction here. It's part of our major. It's in the broadcasting concentration of our major. I'm the advisor to that radio station, WESS. It's a podcaster. It's a broadcaster. It's an archiver. It does all kinds of things, that radio station. It's student operated. I'm wearing a t-shirt that's advertising, in essence, that radio station, and you're wearing t-shirts that are, in essence, advertising a business too. Even if it's something like Abercrombie and Fitch, you're advertising a brand. You may not be thinking of it that way. You may be just thinking of it as, oh, that's how my piece of clothing is marked by the maker. Of course they have their label on it. Well, no, it's not really a label. You're actually advertising that brand every time you're wearing it. In fact, advertising is something that you do, believe it or not, by virtue of being exposed to it. Get this, 10,000 times a week. 10,000 times a week you are exposed to advertising in the United States through various forms of mass media. Now, I've been telling you that mass media are profit-making businesses in the U.S. We've been studying that in this class throughout. And now here is yet another example of where that shows up in the media content, because that advertising is coming out as TV commercials, as billboards, as radio commercials, as banners on the web, as pop-up windows on the web, as links in our news feeds, as graphics and stories in magazines. Advertising is everywhere, 10,000 times a week, even to the extent that we are wearing it on our bodies. And the epitome of advertising, in terms of a density of advertising, is not too far away from our university, and that's New York Times. The Times Square in New York. Times Square in New York is the most dense area of advertising, the most coveted area for advertising in the world because of the density of people. So we're digging into advertising today. We're taking on chapter 12. We're talking about advertising. It is a key element of the American economy. It's not just a sideshow. It's not just how media make money. It's a key element. When the economy does well, advertising does well, and vice versa. I have a saying that I like to introduce from my friend. He's Swedish. He's a Swedish guy that I met while traveling through Sweden many years ago. We've remained friends. His name is Peter, and he worked for many years in marketing in Sweden. He's owned several businesses and advised businesses on both coming together in mergers and also separating from each other. And he has a saying about advertising that I think is instructive. And his saying is, successful advertising is when advertisers own a piece of your mind. It's when they own a piece of your mind. It's like you have a part of your mind that's out of your control. You just succumb to what the advertisers want. It's like if you walk into a Wawa and you're going to get a cola, and you're going to automatically get a Coke because that's what you want. A Coke, right, is a brand. It's not the drink itself, but it's a type of cola. There's also RC Cola. There's also Pepsi Cola. There's other kinds of colas as well, but you're going to get a Coke because the advertisers own a piece of your mind where you're not willing to take a chance. You don't even consider another possibility. It's out of your own control. And I think that's the power of advertising right there that we ought to keep in mind as we go throughout this class. Let's talk now about the history of advertising, as we normally do. We talk about the history of our technologies, but now we're talking about the history of advertising. Really what we're talking about is the birth of consumer culture, the birth of consumer culture. So early advertising, to circle back to newspapers, we covered newspapers. Early advertising was in newspapers, but newspapers were at narrow elite audiences, right? Only those who could read. So early advertising was just very, very basic words like oats for sale at this store. That was advertising. The Boston Newsletter, a good example. The Boston Newsletter, 1704 was the year for that. It ran ads for goods sold in merchant shops. It was just the goods that were sold in those shops. And the customers at that time would therefore judge the quality of those goods by the goods themselves, not by the brand, right? They would go and look at the goods and see them. No brand names in the 1700s. Guess when it all changed? You know, right? You know. It was industrialization. Industrialization changed everything in the 1800s because now you have mass production factories. Remember, factories, mass production of low-cost, standardized products. Something like this today, a pair of sunglasses, this probably costs, I'm going to guess, like 25 cents to produce in China in some factory. That's where I'm guessing they're produced. That's what industrialization does. It makes, and they're standardized, right? Zillions of people have these same cheap sunglasses all over the world. That's standardized products, brings the cost way down. So since products are standardized, you can there advertise for them because the advertising will be accurate, right? If you show McDonald's burger, it's supposedly going to be an accurate depiction of a burger. Many of you will disagree. Regardless of the McDonald's that you go to. So industrialization brought that. It also brought with it modernization. Modernization is not just something that's getting newer. It's not just new and improved. That's not what modern means. It means a new way of living where the person who grows up in a post-industrial society does not have their occupation and their career and, in essence, their destiny chosen for them, as is still the case in some countries like India, for example, or China, for example, to a lesser extent than in the past. But modernization, because of industrialization, you don't have to be a teacher because your parents were. You don't have to be a barrel maker because your parents were. Now you can do whatever you want. Standardized goods are being circulated as something to attract you to purchase because now you have this income, you have this independence to your life. And so one of the first fixtures that we get in these new in this new way of living, which is purchasing things, consumer culture, buying things as a way of living, is the department store. The department store, and one of the very first department stores you can see in a link for today's class, is the John Wanamaker store right down there in Center City, Philadelphia, which is now a Macy's store. It used to be a John Wanamaker. It's a warehouse. That's all a department store is. It houses goods. It doesn't make anything there. And the makers of the goods, they don't have anything to do with the department store. It's just a place where refrigerators and coats and coffee makers and everything else can be sold or housed under one roof. And so that grows up in industrialization. It just fits in with advertising because advertising drives people to these department stores, right, which still exists today in the form of Walmarts and other kinds, Targets and all the other stores out there. Now let's talk about the growth of brand names. It was inevitable that we would get brand names, right? With industrialization and industrial production in particular, we get more and more prepackaged goods coming on the market. And the railroads are helping deliver these goods to other places far away from where the manufacturing facilities actually are. So now we start to get a situation where there are as many goods available as people can buy them. So we start to get a match there. So now it's not automatic that people will buy goods because they need them and there aren't enough available. Like right now and shopping during the pandemic, you've been into a store, there's only one left of something, right? That's a different situation even than what we're talking about after industrialization because we had so many goods. So advertising starts to take a foothold. And brand names are the way that advertising starts to advance, to take this foothold. A brand name is a word or a phrase that's attached to a prepackaged consumer good so that those goods can be better promoted. And what the brand name does is it reduces uncertainty. Hers potato chips, if you're from Pennsylvania, you know exactly what I'm talking about with Hers, or even Hers pretzels, right? You know about that. Or Crest toothpaste, or Coca-Cola, as I mentioned before. Any brand that you have a deep affinity for and associate is like you really covet this brand, whatever the clothing is. You love Abercrombie and Fitch, American Eagle, whatever. You really love that clothing. That's what a brand does to you. It gets that affinity because it reduces the uncertainty and it creates stability. Now, the very first goods that were advertised with brands were maybe not what you think. They were mainly medicines like alcohol and, get this, opium. And they arrived in prepackaged goods instead of being assembled at the store. They came delivered to the warehouse or to the country store, and then they were put on sale, or the corner store in the city. So brands were necessary to distinguish mass-produced products one from the other. Like these are carbon copy of Wayfair glasses, right? That's what this is. But there are other similar styles out there, and there are very different styles, like aviator-style sunglasses. A brand will distinguish that, not the glasses themselves, but a brand will distinguish that. Nike Nike is a very different brand from Champion when it comes to sports clothing. Nike is much more modern, much more, I would say, much more multi-ethnic brand association to it than Champion, which is a much more classical, country clubbish. I might be wrong about that. You can decide for yourself. One of the first people to use the brand and put it into a slogan that became a campaign that was very successful was Thomas Barratt. Thomas Barratt, B-A-R-R-A-T-T, and he developed the first branded soap. Soap, like everybody uses, right? Everybody uses soap every single day, right? All over the house. You use it in the shower, use it or do dishes with. His soap was Pears, P-E-A-R-S, like the fruit, Pears soap. And he had a campaign with an advertising slogan that said, "Have you had your pears today?" You can look at some graphics of Pears soap that I've included in the links today. Have you had your pears today? I think that's ingenious because it's not even asking, do you have pears, right? It's assuming that you have to have it, right? And it's a great way to drive people's psychology to having to purchase this soap. And even Pears itself is a great name for a soap. I think it exudes the cleanliness of that fruit, the pear, if you like the fruit. Not that we eat it that much in Pennsylvania. Now let's move to discussing media and the relation to advertising, and we're just going to flat out say that we have advertising-supported media in this country. It's been that way ever since the beginning. That's where media get their money from, and started really in the 1830s with the penny press. The penny press, very cheap to produce because of the industrial revolution. It only costs a penny. And so that penny was really not for any reason other than to make sure that you were actually selling the paper, because most of the money is coming from the advertising. And the stories are starting to get arranged around the advertising. Did you know that? Advertising and newspaper gets laid out first, and then the stories get put around it. And that's why you have the beginning of the story on the front page, and you have to flip over to the rest of the story on page 5, and your eyes will be dragged across several pages of ads. That's the theory there in advertising in newspapers. So we have very large audiences in newspapers. They appeal to newspapers. Newspapers just embraced advertising really from the very beginning. Magazines were a little bit slower, but they quickly went to advertising. They started with advertising more slowly because their content was national, and ads at that time were local to a large extent. But with the railroads and industrialization, you're starting to get products from Philadelphia like cream cheese, Philadelphia cream cheese. I see Philadelphia cream cheese in Mexico everywhere I go to. You cannot get sushi in Mexico. Not that I eat a lot of sushi in Mexico, but you can't get sushi in Mexico without Philadelphia cream cheese, and that's how international that product is. And we saw the same thing because of the railroads in early industrial America, and that helped magazines start to become national because they could run national ads for things like, I'm not saying Philadelphia cream cheese, but national products. When it comes to radio first tried taxes. That's what radio first tried, and then it went to tolls, the AT&T toll, and then it went to advertising, and it's been an advertising medium ever since. Even William Paley, right? He had that cigar company, and he bought a whole radio network just to advertise his cigars. He didn't even see that it would be a medium that would carry music or anything like that. It was just an advertising network in the beginning. Now, of course, it's a huge television and other network. Television had ads from the very beginning. As soon as TV was invented and used, it was an advertising medium. And the crescendo of TV in terms of advertising, in terms of really all media, is the Super Bowl, right? That is the advertising crescendo of media in our country. That's when people even go to the Super Bowl. Some people, not necessarily to watch the game, but to see the ads. At least that's the way it used to be. I'm not sure if they've kept up that attraction, all those ads. And the halftime show, of course, is another part of that event. It's not just about the football game, but we see all the brand new ads that roll out during the Super Bowl, and that event delivers 45% of the American audience to advertisers. 45% of the American audience that's out there is watching the Super Bowl, and that's what advertisers have access to, and that's why it costs like $6 million for a 30-second ad, I think was the last price that I heard. $6 million for a 30-second ad on the Super Bowl. All right, let's talk now about different kinds of advertising. We're going to talk about first consumer advertising. Consumer advertising, this is where local advertising induces people to go to a local store or business. You can act by going somewhere that's within your local walking distance, your driving distance, your bicycling, however you get around. And usually this kind of advertising contains a direct action message, as it's known. Direct action message, which is designed to get the consumer to engage in a specific behavior, like hurry on down, these prices won't last. Or The remote that is happening on our car parking lot is ending today. Come get your free t-shirts and other swag for the radio station WSVG. An example of a radio station doing a remote. Direct action messages tell you what to do. Purchase now, buy one, get one free, etc., etc. So you also have national advertising that takes place in consumer advertising, but it is different. It builds demand for a product, but it doesn't necessarily send the consumer to a specific store. So you will see ads for Geico. You will see ads that can be direct action messages. You will see ads for McDonald's. You'll see ads for Verizon, and there will be promotions, and there will be ticking clocks for dates where these promotions won't last. And those are direct action messages, but they're not telling you where to go. They're assuming you know the local store to go to. Then we also have indirect action messages. Indirect messages, they just try to build the image of a product. Like Maytag, we have a Maytag video in the link today. Maytag is all about selling the imagery that you never have to repair a Maytag. You never have to worry about it. It just runs and runs and runs. So the Maytag ads have nothing to do with the machines themselves. They distract you to get you think that you can just fiddle around with other ideas while the machine is just always working. And that's an indirect action message designed to get you to still perceive that Maytag is a reliable machine and nothing more. That's all the advertising is trying to do. All right, next up we have advocacy advertising. We're leaving behind consumer advertising. We're going to advocacy advertising. This is advertising that promotes a point of view rather than a product. It's promoting a point of view. It can range anything from an anti-smoking campaign to a lower taxes campaign to a got milk campaign. It runs the gamut on political advertisements, Republican ads, Democratic ads. It can be pro appointing a Supreme Court justice or con appointing a Supreme Court justice. That's what advocacy advertising is all about, which is sort of related to our third type of advertising, which is public service advertising. I don't even like the name of this. I'm just going to tell you flat out. I don't think you can be public service and be advertising. You will always have that profitable bias that's behind you, and that just makes you, it makes it impossible for you to be public service. Public service has to be free from any influence other than what's in the best interest of the public. But nevertheless, that's what it's called in the chapter, public service advertising. It's also called PSAs, which in radio we actually call public service announcements. So this is a fuzzy area in my opinion, but it's the idea that you're promoting movements and habits that are not associated with profit. And to make things even murkier, there is a council that was established for this called the Ad Council. That doesn't help, right? The Ad Council. And it was established way back in 1942 in World War II with the We Can Do It war campaign. And at that time, mostly what the PSAs, as they were called, were dealing with were promoting women in factories. Promoting it's okay for women to go to work in factories, right? That's what they had to get past first. Forget about what kind of conditions they're working in. But they are working in factories. We've got to get those women in the factories because the men are at war. That's the way things were then. The best known icon was Smokey the Bear. He's still around today. You drive out west into those national forests, you still see Smokey the Bear. Be careful with lighting any fires. No fires prohibited in most of the West right now. And McGruff the Crime Dog. I don't know if you know about that one. That was a big one. That's helping people stay aware of their surroundings and not be susceptible to crime. Next up, another kind of advertising we have moving on is trade advertising. Trade advertising, that's where you have a business advertising to another business. If you've ever been in a beauty salon or a barber shop for that matter, and you see magazines laying around, you pick them up and you see ads for razors or shavers or hair products or other kinds of accessories, chemicals, even clothing. Those are magazines to try and get those salons to purchase products from another business. So it's business to business trade advertising. We have a trade publication in my field called Broadcasting and Cable, and that's actually for cable TV owners and broadcast TV station owners to consider what TV shows to purchase from independent producers and distributors to air in their markets in Houston, etc. I don't know if you ever knew that business had existed. So there's a lot of trade advertising that goes on that you'll never see unless you're in that business. Now let's move on to discussing the advertising business. What does it consist of? It basically consists of 4 different groups. If you're looking at the advertising business, again, we have an invention that started out a brand, right? Because of industrialization, now it's full-blown business, just like every other media form that we've studied in this class. So we've got 4 groups as part of the advertising business. You've got 4 groups. The first group is the client. That's the client. That's the company with something to sell. Company with something to sell. It could be a Geico. It could be a McDonald's. It could be an Arm & Hammer. It could be an Abercrombie & Fitch. They got a company with something to sell. They maybe want to increase awareness of the product. Maybe they're rolling out a new line of clothing. Maybe they're getting into a new area like Google. Google you think of as a browser company. Maybe they're going to get into robotics. They're already into robotics, but maybe they're going to start selling products that will clean your household, vacuum cleaners and stuff like that. And they want to increase awareness of that. Or maybe the advertiser, maybe the client. That's what I'm talking about now, the client. That's the first group. That's the client. That's what I'm talking about, the company with something to sell. Maybe they want to encourage people to use the existing product. Like, do you have baking soda sitting around? Yeah, you probably do, right? But do you use it? Probably not. It's probably sitting in your fridge. Did you know you can clean things with it? Yeah, you can clean some of your taps on your faucets. You can clean some of that. Did you know that you can reuse all kinds of things in different ways? That's the idea of consumers, is to producers, I should say, is to get you to use up what you have, so that then go to the store and purchase another one. And sometimes means getting people to use what they already have. Or you can build a positive image of a product. Just maybe you have to do that because the product has been associated badly, like Corona beer, right? What did Corona beer do during the coronavirus, right? Are they still waiting to come back? And maybe they're going to change the colors and everything else, new age, once the coronavirus is gone. I don't know, but that's advertising does that as well. Sometimes advertising is trying to convince people to switch brands from Pepsi to Coke, from Coke to Pepsi. Switch brands. Come on over, try it. We've tried something new. Or are you tired of that brand? Sometimes advertising is to demonstrate the use of a product. Show you how do you use a product? How do you use a skateboard? I mean, as somebody who's not used a skateboard, who's older, they might be intimidated until they see a skateboard commercial with somebody using a skateboard, with somebody of their age using a skateboard. Let's go on to the next group when we're talking about the advertising business, and that's the ad agency. The ad agency, now this is a company, and it works to sell space and time to those clients. And it also matches clients to media advertisers. So let's unpack that. Okay, so you have an advertising agency. There are many of them located in New York City and on the West Coast in California. Now, here's how it works. Let's say I'm McDonald's. And we are rolling out a brand new breakfast meal. And this breakfast meal is going to include chorizo in it, because we think that the Latin population has really gotten America to get into chorizo as a meat, which is commonly eaten in Latin America. So we're going to do the chorizo burrito for a $1 value menu. And so we want to advertise that, but we don't know what TV stations and what radio stations to choose in each market. Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Miami. We don't know that. We're just McDonald's. We're just in the business of selling food. So we go to an advertising agency. We say, here's our product. Here's the people we want to get to. We want to get to people who either intermix with Latino peoples or who have Latino heritage, and we want to advertise to them. And then the advertising agency says, okay, here's our data. You want this radio station in Miami, you want this radio station in Houston, you want this radio station in Philadelphia, you want this one in Los Angeles. And now we're going to recommend a campaign strategy for what the theme of this commercial should be. It's going to involve 2 females, and these 2 females, one is white and one is Latina, and they're going to meet and blah, 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 blah. That's what the advertising agency does. It puts these 2 entities together, the producer in this case, McDonald's, and it finds that audience that they want to get to via the mass media that the advertiser in McDonald's wants to purchase time on, or space in, if it's a web page or a newspaper or a magazine. That's how advertising agencies work. Typically, they get 15% of the sales. They get a commission right there. 15% of the sales. The leading advertising agency of the 1860s and 1870s, which really gave the advertising agency industry its bona fide credentials, was George Roll. George Roll is the leading advertising agent of the 1860s and 70s. And so advertising agencies, to put it into clear terms, they copy and they produce ads, right? And they represent the client. They go out looking for places to advertise. They use a different mix of media to advertise the products. They do research. They provide creative activity. And they do media planning figuring out which media to use. Now let's go on to the media. Let's talk about the third group in the advertising business, the media. It's different for each medium. So let's just say flat out, what two media that we've studied in this class that you know of, what two are really not good advertising media? That's the plural, right? Media, not mediums. No such word, mediums. But which two are not good for advertising, right? You can probably figure that out. Books, right? When do you see much advertising in books? And films. You'll see trailers. You'll see product placement in films where USA Today or Coke or Verizon is paid to have their product displayed as part of the plot in a film. That's called product placement. But by and large, these two media are not that advertising friendly. Maybe they'll find a way to make them advertising friendly in the future. The others, however, starting with newspapers, are different. In newspapers, the ad revenue has gone way, way down. It continues to come down. It used to be brought in because that was the only really game in town for local stuff. So you could clip coupons and advertising on the front page for a car wash would get people into the car wash. And then there was the classified section of the newspaper, apartments for rent, and, a lawnmower for sale, whatnot. And that's all gone now. It's gone over to Craigslist, gone over to Facebook Marketplace, and all the other places that people can go to find ads and find products. And so newspapers have really been struggling. Add to that people are accessing them online. They're not paying subscriptions to have them flopped into their driveways each and every morning. My very first job, by the way, was a paper boy. I used to go around on my bicycle with my bag, my satchel, throw in the newspaper. I'd have to go collect money on a monthly basis, and that involved walking up driveways with huge barking dogs. Yeah, that was a scary job in a lot of ways. It was fun too in some ways, but that doesn't exist anymore because in newspaper, you look at a newspaper today, the Pocono Record used to be like this, and I used to write a column for them for the Pocono Record for 3 years, the Rounding Some Corners column, and that newspaper is down now to like this. But they still exist. There's still a need. There's still a need for local journalism. There's still a need to find out something that only a local reporter can find out about East Stroudsburg or Stroudsburg, like the railroad that may be coming to town. That's something that maybe only local people can dig up. So newspapers still finding themselves. The big newspapers, by the way, they do well. The big metropolitan newspapers, because they have the density of population where they can get people to read, like the Washington Post and the other newspapers we've discussed. Philadelphia Inquirer, they're okay. That's the local newspapers. They're the ones that are struggling. Moving on to magazines. Now, magazines, they're an excellent medium for reaching a niche audience, very, very small audience. They go for golfers. They go for fitness people. They go for people who are interested in home improvement. You know what I'm talking about. People have very, very detailed coverage. They're also a very excellent medium for business-to-business ads, like I talked about earlier with trade advertising, trade magazines. The next kind of advertising we haven't talked about really at all in this class, and that's outdoor advertising, and that's people in a car. People are in a car in the United States. That's a big part of life, is to get into a car and drive somewhere. Now, that may change with the infrastructure bill somewhat, and it's changing for the millennial generation. A lot of them are just saying, I don't want a car. But you still have to get a car to get around the United States because of the way that we've built our country. And so outdoor advertising is very appealing on billboards and on buses and on bus bench seats and on vehicles like vans driving around with advertising on them, and digital billboards as well, and transit signs that you see inside of buses. So ATMs, right? They have advertising as well. And Times Square, as I said, is the most outdoor advertising space. But people in cars, they don't have that sustained vision, right? They got like a second or two to look at what they have to see, and then they got to get back on the road. That's what one would hope. It does bring up the ethics of even having something that takes people's eyes off the road. Let's move on to radio now. Radio can broadcast advertising at a very low cost compared to other media, and you can saturate radio. You can buy a bunch of advertising. That's why if I say you give me 15 minutes and then you know what's coming next, right? We'll save you 15% or more, because that's what Geico has got into your brain through so many radio ads and television ads. But you can just saturate the airwaves in radio. You can buy so much time. Most of the time that's bought is during what's known as drive time in radio. Drive time, that's where you're driving in a vehicle. And that's when radio is listened to, right? People are in a car, and that's when they listen to radio when they're driving. The big times are when you're commuting to work. So you have a morning drive, 6 to 10 in the morning, and you have an afternoon drive. That's 3 to 7 in the afternoon when people are driving home. Radio has two prime times. and that's when you have advertising. Next up is television. Television offers a prime time that is like none other. It's got most of the people in the nation fixated on doing something at the same time between 8 and 11 at night. It's prime time. And it offers sound, and it offers motion, and it offers visuals. Those are different from the other media. It's like it got the best of so many worlds, television. But it does face obstacles because people have that remote control. They can zip past it. Some people are recording programs on TiVos, and they can automatically go past the ads. Some people just get up and walk out of the room and go to the bathroom or grab a beer or whatever. So TV faces obstacles there. And then that takes us to the internet. And in the internet, we've got really a different situation where it's the fastest growing segment of the ad market. So we don't quite know where it's going right now. We've got all different kinds of possibilities. We've got video ads, we've got search ads, we've got banner ads. It's just really easy to track people on the internet. Every time they click, every time they log on, every time they walk around with their phone in their back pocket, you can at least know the location of a person. And then as soon as they start fiddling around with their phone and punching things and providing that big data, then you've got a lot of information. It's going to grow. It's going to definitely grow. Advertisers are still somewhat reluctant to advertise on the new medium, the internet, and so you got to get past that barrier as well. All right, so we've just wrapped up the media, and now we're going to talk about the final area of the advertising business, and that's the audience. The audience, and that's you. That's the people watching, viewing, listening, reading, all the people who are consuming media. Advertisers are trying to target you by your age, by your interest, by your occupation. You know, if you happen to like country music, then you might also be interested in a pickup truck. You know, that's a stereotype, but that's what's going on all the time. And advertisers are studying you through your demographics. Your demographics, that would be facts about you, your age, your sex, your gender, your income level, your ethnicity, your religion, facts about you. That's your demographics. So there's the two most commonly studied ones in mass media are gender and age. Age and gender, those are the two most looked at to try and figure out whether somebody will buy something. And then also you have psychographics that are looked at. Psychographics are attitudes and behaviors of the audience, and that's how will people act, and what will their attitudes be. Somebody who rides a skateboard actually would be more likely to drink a Gatorade than somebody who listens to symphony music. Those two would go less together than the other two. And so psychographics is attitudes. There's an attitude about a Gatorade that is also there for a skateboard, and behaviors. And then geographics is just tracking where people are, where people go, where people travel around, and that's why your news feed shows up with so much advertising based on where your cell phone says that you are. All right, so let's move on now to advertising in contemporary culture. Advertising in contemporary culture. And we're just going to make the point here that advertising is a big part of our culture. We repeat slogans in our speech, in everyday conversations. We wear the latest fashion that's been told to us by advertising. We conduct ourselves like people in ads. Advertising is part and parcel of American culture. We have jingles, we have slogans. And yet advertising can be criticized. Advertising can be criticized rather harshly because of a lot of things that it enters that are not there. And I can tell you, because I've lived in countries such as Sweden or the United Kingdom, where there's a lot less advertising on purpose. It's regulated, it's forced. For example, you're not allowed to have any billboard advertising in Sweden along the coast, so that you just appreciate the coast and so that it's not polluted visually. And that's actually one of the criticisms. Let's talk about the criticisms of advertising. One is that they're just aesthetically not pleasing. They're ugly. They add pollution to the environment, noise pollution, especially those billboards that start getting dilapidated because of the weather in Pennsylvania. They start peeling away. They're ugly one. Another one is that advertising teases us all the time and leaves us with unfulfilled desires, especially sexual desires. Advertising is constantly teasing us with focusing on body parts in commercials, with having people move in sexual ways, with having suggestive language. There's a lot of sex there, and then it gets people teased, and not just sex. The weather itself is weather coming up. Wait till you hear what this storm's going to do coming up after the break. Why not now? If the storm's that important, why not now? Why after the break? A lot of teasing goes on in advertising. Advertising also sells things that are not necessarily good for us. Is Lucky Charms good for you at all? Is soda good for you at all? Even toothpaste has sugar in it. All of those are advertised. All of those are bought regularly. All of those are favorites of many, many people, but there's nothing good about them, or hardly anything anyhow. So there's a lot of different criticisms of advertising, the last of which is that it sells you stuff that you don't need, or gets you to buy stuff, I should say, that you don't need, right? That's why many of you in this class right now have a credit card bill that you say, I mean, I know I have Christmas presents on there, but I can't believe how high this bill is. How am I going to get it down, right? But you didn't need to buy those things to eat, to sleep, etc. So another criticism of advertising. There are also problems for advertising as a business in terms of the industry itself. You got problems of clutter, too much clutter, like in Times Square. Like there will be ads that you will never see even if you stay there all day and look around because there's too much clutter. And the same thing exists in our lives. How does the advertising on television break through in the clutter when your phone is also giving you a pop-up ad? When your the television of your roommate upstairs is on an advertisement right now. There's so much clutter of advertisement everywhere we go. And then there's subliminal advertising. Subliminal advertising is where there's hidden persuasion going on. It's working on your subconscious. That means you don't even know about it. Some of the early subliminal media content that was delivered was in a film in New Jersey, actually. It was in a New Jersey film theater, and there was a market researcher who wanted to test out subliminal advertising. His name was Jim Vicary, Vicary, and he did some studies of movie where they inserted slides that said drink Coke and eat popcorn. He put those slides into a movie, and they were so quick, like just one slide, like when a film rolls, it's so quick, just one slide that you're not aware of seeing it, but your brain picks it up anyhow. And according to his data, people rushed to the concession stands and bought popcorn and soda, much more than if they hadn't have seen those. We still see subliminal ads today. George Bush, the second president, when he ran for president, he had a subliminal ad about Al Gore that came out where he was crossed out words and a subliminal ad came over. You can look that up. I think I have a link to it. There's just a lot of hidden stuff. Disney. We've already looked at Disney. Disney has a whole range of hidden stuff that supposedly goes on that's sexual. Or we will take a look at that before the end of the class. And then finally, there's the issue of advertising to children. In the United States, there are some protections. You cannot put a commercial for a product that is also in a cartoon next to that cartoon in terms of the scheduling of that cartoon on television. You can have the cartoon ending at 10 and then an ad for Blue's Clues or Mickey Mouse comes on. You can't do that, but generally speaking, there's a lot of looseness in American culture. I can tell you, once again, in Sweden, you're not allowed to advertise at children at all. You can't put a child in an ad. You can't have an ad geared towards a child who's going to be walking through the grocery stores and wants to pull off every sugary, colorful thing that they can. You cannot do that in Sweden because children are protected. They're vulnerable. They're seen as being exploited when that happens. You can't put them in ads because they can't determine what their career is going to be. They can't determine whether that's the kind of thing that they would have wanted to do with their life. And once they're in an ad, it changes them forever, even if it makes the parents a lot of money, which is kind of the point. Which brings us now to the future of advertising. It's difficult, as always, to say what the future of anything is in a mass media environment, but we do know that there will be more integrated advertising. Integrated marketing is how it's really called, and that's where advertising blends in with public relations. We'll demonstrate that next class, by the way, and sales promotion and interactive media. Those are all separate areas of media content distribution and activity in the media world. They all come together or will come together more in the future for advertising. We know there will be more mobile phone advertising. There's not as much as there can be. We are starting to see a lot more pop-ups in YouTube, for example. You know about that if you watch these videos on YouTube. So we'll see more in some ways because that's where people are looking, right? That's their first screen is their phone. We're going to see more advertising there. We'll see more product placement in both television and film where advertisers pay for their product to be a central plot of the story. And that does limit, let's be upfront about it, does limit creativity on the part of the screenwriters and the directors and all the other creative personnel. They have to incorporate Coke or USA Today or a cell phone company into the plot. And then finally, we know that there will be social marketing, and that's using social media to market products. We already know that's happening, and we know that one of the best ways that people will adopt a new product is if they see a friend using it rather than, or somebody they respect, rather than an unknown person advertising it to them. So there's a lot of things for you to consider about advertising, but after all, it is something you're doing 10,000 times a week. Have a great day.